I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I'm going to test out and review what I think is going to be an extremely beginner-friendly dye source for dyeing wool-based yarns, and that is these wool tincture dyes. These dyes are supposedly like a little dye tea bag. I think there's citric acid in like a tea bag, so that way you can maybe mess-free, really easily set up a kettle dyeing project. And I think that the product looks like it's really innovative. It really captured my interest. I do have some concerns and apprehensions that I'll bring up as we encounter them. But let's go take a closer look at the dye packets. I am not a beginning dyer, so this product really isn't marketed towards me. I have over 1,000 yarn dyeing videos here. But I do love to dye yarn, and I guess disclosures wise, I did buy these dyes myself, but I am a Knit Picks affiliate and you can purchase these dyes through Knit Picks. And so if you make any purchases through my links, I do have links and affiliate links down in the video description, I will earn a commission. So I got this pack of eggplant and turquoise, and each of these containers contains 2 of the wool tincture dyes, 2 citric acid packets, and so in theory each one is enough to dye 200 grams of yarn, so 400 grams of yarn total. And I think I paid $22.50 for this kit. We have our instructions right here on the packet. You add the packet to a jar, add hot water, soak with no acid, soak the yarn in with the dye, and then stir in citric acid and let everything sit and cool to room temperature to then rinse and dry. Very simple, and this is a very surface level correct instruction of what will work to dye yarn. But here are some concerns. The biggest thing missing here for me is a link to the Wool Tincture Dyes website to say, for full instructions, visit, with a QR code or something, because they have a full page, full instruction sheet on their website. And there they have more instructions, like pre-soak the yarn, fill your glass jar with warm water before you add boiling water, don't use anything for food, and things like that. And I think that if someone just buys these packets, they may just try it as is without going and looking for more instructions. I'm being extremely nitpicky here. Maybe it's time to go take a look at the website. All right, as we go to the website, it's a very cute website. It says it's easy as brewing a cup of tea. Drop, pour, soak, and stir. These are the instructions we've seen before, and I think that they are pretty legit. Fast, simple, tidy, safe, predictable. And so the thing that is attractive to me is that since the dyes are in a tea bag, you never have to touch the powder. I still plan to put on my respirator mask as I'm doing this, and we'll check for fallout from the tea bag just to see. Easy and fun. But see, I'm going here and we have their offerings, but what I really want is to go to the techniques. And so we can view and download the instructions, and I think that this should be highlighted more because it is done to be in a very tidy way, and maybe this is something that is a pamphlet that they put in when you order from their website. But there are more steps here, and I think that this would be handy to have come with the dyes. Yes, this is going to be as simple as brewing a pot of tea, but there's just a few other things that I think it would be helpful for people to know. And so part of me was like, okay, well, should I try to do this just as things are written, or should I try to use this the way that I know how? Speaking of safety, whenever I'm dealing with dry dye powders, I'm always wearing a deluxe respirator mask or a well-fitting N95 dust mask, safety glasses, and gloves. And I plan to do this today, even though it's not recommended. And it's possible that the tea bag keeps things contained and that all the powders are really contained and there's no risk of inhalation. And that would be really, really great. But I think that I still would wear the respirator protection just because I come into contact with a lot of dye powders, and so the amount of exposure can be as important as other things. And ultimately, you will need to make the best decisions for yourself, but I'm always going to recommend safety equipment. Everything I'm going to be using is dedicated for dyeing yarn and is never used for the preparation of food. I have an 8-cup jar here that I have dyed yarn in before. It's smaller than what they recommend, but it's what I have, so that's what I'm going to use. I have a set of tongs for stirring, removing the yarn. I have a cork hot plate here because I do plan to add very hot water into here. And as for the source of the hot water, I'm going to be using an electric kettle. This is a dedicated dye kettle for me. Yeah, that's just, again, my preference. I separate all cooking things from dyeing things, even though I dye yarn in my kitchen and feel comfortable doing that. And my work surface is protected with a shower curtain. Oh, and of course the yarn. I went ahead and pre-soaked 200 grams of Knit Picks Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and I've pre-soaked it in just some plain tap water with no acid. I always like to add a removable nylon zip tie onto my yarn. It acts as an extra tie. It makes it easy to lift, and for me it helps prevent tangling things up because you can always sort of reorder the directions of the yarn around the tie. And so that's something else I use that's not in the instructions, but that's a me thing. The last thing I want to do before I put on my respirator mask is I want to fill this with hot water. It's room temperature, but I guess it's bad to put hot water into a glass jar. And so, yeah, we don't want to make a mess. All right, I warmed up the glass jar, and now I'm going to put on my respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves. So I will be more muffled. We're going to start with the purple, and let's see, I'm following the online instructions. Pre-warm that, yep. And let's open this up and see what we're working with. Okay, we have like a cute, are there instructions in here? That would be really awesome. No. Okay, we have like a little wax bag that says eggplant. That is really handy. And then in here, we have the wool tincture dye. I haven't found the citric acid yet, but I'm sort of shaking this over a paper towel and rubbing my fingers on it. Okay, if I rub my fingers on it, I got some dye. Oh, am I getting fallout? I don't know. I need to redo that test, everybody. I mean, I think there is some fallout, but I need to check in here. Oh, there's the citric acid. The citric acid packets are separate at the bottom. All right, I think that there's fallout, but let's try this again. For science. Okay, I'm taking this bag up. Yep, I saw some dye come out. So the powders can fit through this bag, and therefore I have to recommend that you protect your work surface and wear a respirator mask. But now we're going to take our packet and we're going to add it to the pre-warmed jar. And then they want to slowly pour, they want 12 cups, which this does not fit. And I have some cooled off, I boiled this water and I cooled it off. And I think I'm going to add, goodness, we need space for the yarn to go in. So I'm going to start with 4 cups. Because we need there to be space for the yarn to fit, and we can add more water. Use this, and they said to discard this, but there's still dye in it. So I'm going to stir. I don't know the instructions tell me to stir, but okay, I'm going to let that sit a minute. Okay, and they want us to remove the dye tea bag before. Okay, I want to make sure that all the dye is out of here. There is still some dye in there. Now, they recommend a bigger jar, but I did not have one. And oh, actually, now that all the dye is wet, this is the point when I'm comfortable removing my respirator mask. But whenever I'm dealing with dry dye powders, I'm always wearing it. So I can't tell. Oh, okay, this is looking empty. All right, we're gonna remove the tea bag, pop it into like a secondary container. I'm gonna add a little more water because I think that we can have a little more. And then I'm gonna bring over the yarn. I'm removing most of the pre-soak liquid so it can fit better. And remove the excess water and lower your yarn into the dye bath. And so I think I did about 5 cups of water in here before the yarn. This is gonna give us a very beautiful, saturated purple. Now there's no acid in here yet. And if you want the color to be more even, you should stir. There's not a lot of space in this jar to stir. I think we'll try one of these in a kettle where I can use more water in a little bit. I definitely recommend safety glasses, but I'm actually pretty impressed that the coverage on this is so even right now. But we're supposed to wait 2 to 3 minutes. And so I'll just start a little timer and we'll pop back. Okay, it's been 2 to 3 minutes. Now, the instructions want you to move the yarn to the side in the jar to then add the citric acid in. I can't do that easily in this jar. We are making a little bit of a mess. But now I'm gonna take the citric acid packet, pop that in, give this a good stir. I think we'll do the second color in a kettle because then I have a little more space to work, but it might be easier for someone to get a jar than a kettle. But one of the questions I have is all the dye gonna strike? And is that all dissolved? It looks like it. So now I'm coming back with our yarn. And so again, we have a really tiny volume of water here. And the best way for me to stir, and you can see I'm making a little bit of a mess, is to raise and lower the yarn. But this should stay warm a really long time. And in fact, even in this really short time, I think I can show you the dye bath is already starting to clear. So a lot of this color is already in the yarn, and now I just need to let it sit until it gets to be room temperature. So far, is this completely mess-free? No, but it was really, really easy, and it could be, oh, there must have been a little powder on the counter. It could be very mess-free if you were taking the packet out and putting it straight in and not testing for fallout. Okay, but out of curiosity, it's warm to touch right now. I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes and then we'll see if it still feels warm then. This was really easy to set up. I feel like I was a little clumsy because I was trying to follow their instructions versus my own instincts, but I think that this could be a really great product. However, I have to recommend that when you're dealing with dry dye powders, you wear some kind of respirator mask, N95, something, because there is fallout. And I think if you're taking the dye tea bag and going straight into the container, straight with water, the risk of exposure is low. But if you have it and you're being silly and you're waving it around or you're doing something like that, then there's gonna be some fallout and a mess. And so, yeah, I feel obligated to recommend that safety. One thing I realized that would have been a helpful point to make that I inadvertently made. When I was thinking about this, I'm like, oh, I have an 8-cup jar. They mentioned 12 cups of water. That's pretty close. But as I started to pour in the water, I remembered I need space to stir and I need space to add the yarn into the jar. And so you need to, when you're filling your container with water, the volume isn't that important. It's more important if you want more even coverage, but you need to make sure you leave room for the yarn. And so that's what's important. It's been 30 minutes. This is still warm to touch. Let's pop my safety glasses on and I'm gonna grab gloves because I'm curious about if the dye has exhausted. That means it's all the dye in our yarn, how much is left. okay, we have a little bit, which I don't think you can really see. It's sort of like a reddish brown. You can kind of see there. That is not from the trivet. There, now you can see that color a little better. So most of the dye is in our yarn. There's just that last little bit left. And actually, dipping my fingers, my gloved fingers in, the water I would say is like warm. Maybe the container feels warmer than the yarn is, but I would say we probably have at least another 30 minutes to an hour or so for this to cool off. So I'm gonna just set it aside and let it completely cool before we go and remove the yarn to wash it. Now color-wise, it's looking really dark, but I think that we are gonna be on target for an eggplant, for a very bluish purple like here. Yarn will look darker when it's wet than it will when it is dry. It's probably been another hour. We're close to room temperature. Let's go over to the sink and rinse the yarn. Okay, I'm gonna remove the yarn. I realized that one troubleshooting tip, it may not be obvious for people that you should remove the tea bag before adding the yarn. Oh, this color is gorgeous and saturated. There's a hint of some color left in the dye bath, but that's not a problem. You could reuse the dye bath. I'm gonna remove my gloves at this point. But if you add the yarn in, and I'm gonna add some dish soap. If you add the yarn in at the same time as the tea bag, then you could end up with uneven color coverage. But there's enough pigment in here that I'm sure I'll notice some tonal variation in a bit, but it's really good. Now, this rinse water is not clear, but the dye bath wasn't clear, so that's not surprising. I'm gonna fill this basin, it's with cool water, and I'm adding a little bit more dish soap because you'll know that the color is well set when we can wash it without color coming out. Bleeding at this stage could happen for a number of reasons though. If you're seeing a ton of color come out at this rinsing stage, I would add it back into hot water with citric acid. But we're looking good. You can let it soak in here for a while. I didn't look to see if the instructions said to use soap, but I like to show wash fastness by using soap. So that's just a preference, but we're looking really good now. And so I'm impressed because this is a pretty saturated color. I would say it could be equivalent to, I don't know, about a 1% depth of shade of, not eggplant. It's darker than deep purple. I'm trying to think of like Dharma dyes that are equivalent, but it's a beautiful saturated color anyway. But yeah, no bleeding. This is saturated. Now that we're done rinsing out the soap, I'm just rinsing it one last time. I don't even need to fill it. I just want all that soap out. I'm gonna take the yarn, put it through my spin dryer just to remove some of that water and hang it up to dry so we can see the finished color. But I'm really pleased. Now that we've tested this out, let's talk about some of the pros and cons. One pro, this is very easy to use and I think ultimately is very beginner friendly, except for the biggest con. The instructions are not easy to find. When you find the detailed instructions, those are very easy to follow, but it looks like you have all the instructions you need on the packet, and so someone could get confused and not know how long to wait after adding the hot water to the dye packet and things like that. Not to mention, if you look at what's needed on the packet itself versus on the detailed instructions, the list of supplies is different. And they recommend that you, for example, they recommend you have a thermometer so you make sure your water isn't too hot, and that isn't something listed on the other packet, and so could make someone feel intimidated. I mean, I didn't use a thermometer. I don't think you need a thermometer. Other pros, I think that there's a nice range of colors in this line. I love that they have They package two colors that they think would work well together as like duos. I think that's adorable. And you can get a dye jar that's the size they recommend and tongs and other tools on their website. And so I think that that is great. One con is I probably wouldn't repurchase these for myself unless I wanted to do an experiment specifically with them because of the price. And this is more for me as an indie dyer. I dye hundreds of skeins of yarn a year versus someone who might want to be dabbling and trying this out. So I paid $22.50 for 4 packets, basically, enough to dye 400 grams of yarn. The most expensive dye I purchased at Dharma Trading Company is about $10 for a ½ ounce, which is over 50 grams. And so for $10, I can dye easily over 50 skeins of yarn. And with these packets, I can't dye quite that much. And also, as a more advanced dyer, I would love to know how much dye is in each package, just because it would give me a feel, oh, okay, there's a gram of dye in there. I can dye 200 grams with this packet and get a slightly lighter color, and that's fine. It would help me gauge that because I have a feel of how much dye to use per amount of yarn. But again, this is me being extremely nitpicky. And also, this is not a product that is marketed for me. It's a product that's marketed for beginners. And this is a reason why I'm not their target customer. I do think that while it's expensive for someone who dyes at the scale I do, I think it's a reasonable price for the product that it is and given the time to like measure and package everything. So I think that there is something okay there. I just think that for the price, they could easily have that printout there. The printout with instructions could be folded and sort of slipped in between the two packets, or it could even be inside the packet itself. And I think that having that page of instructions come with the dyes would increase the beginner-friendly notion of this tenfold. Because you look at this and you think the instructions are, okay, I brew tea, I mix them together, and ultimately that is what you do, but beginners often have a lot of questions, including there was a reasonable question that I saw in a review that said, okay, there was a discrepancy about the amount of water from, one set of instructions to another, and I didn't know what to do. Ultimately, the difference of 2 cups of water isn't going to make a big difference. The volume of water that you're using to dye yarn can help you get more even coverage. But for a setup like this, if I'm using 8 cups of water or 16 cups of water, both are going to work to dye the yarn just fine. You might just be able to get more even coverage with that 16 cups. So I wouldn't stress about that, but a beginner might. A beginner might look at 2 sets of instructions, feel confused and feel overwhelmed, and that's taking away from the extreme beginner-friendly notion of this. Because I remember when I first started dyeing yarn with acid dyes, I was extremely intimidated about making a dye stock, about getting the right safety equipment, and I was very nervous about that. And so I think that this whole system can be so unintimidating that it could be a real asset for people learning to dye yarn. I think that this could be a really wonderful thing to include in a learn to dye kit. And so this just might mean they need to update their packaging and instructions and update some things on their website. It's fixable, but overall, I do think it's a really fun product. I mean, I was intrigued enough by this product that I went and bought it myself, just so that way I could review it. And so that says something. I could have reached out to the company, but the reason why I didn't for this product is because I had these concerns and I wanted to experience this sort of as a consumer without reaching out, asking these questions and things, and then coming in with explanations from the company itself, if that makes sense. One of the more negative comments, which was still a 4-star review, that I saw on their website was someone complaining that the colors that they got on the yarn didn't match the color they had on the swatch card or something. And this is not necessarily a fault of the dyes themselves. I've shown here on this channel that different dyes will look different on different blends of yarn. A color is gonna look really different on a wool silk blend than it is gonna look on 100% wool. And sometimes it's just up the shade, sometimes it's even the hue a little bit. And especially if you're dealing with a lighter color, that might be influenced more than the original color of the yarn that you're using. Maybe it's a little more white, maybe it's a little more yellow. That can have an impact in the final color that you see. And so, yeah, I think troubleshooting wise, that is something that exists. I think that with these dyes, it would be harder to get a lighter color on your yarn unless you're using way more water and potentially dissolving the dye and partitioning some of the water away before you go ahead and add the yarn, or just add more yarn to one packet, because these colors are striking really quickly. But that's not a bad thing given that we're at, well, we're hot, but we're cooling to room temperature. Here's the finished yarn, and this purple is a purple that reaches my soul. I adore a deep eggplant color. This is so close to the color my bridesmaids wore at my wedding. I love it, adore it. The tonal variation in here is really subtle and really perfect. I think it'll really give a little bit of dimension to whatever's made with this yarn without being so loud that it would not work well with a more complicated stitch pattern. Super pretty. I really, really want to love this because I think it's a really cool product. And I do like it, but I think that it needs a few tweaks. Not in the actual product itself. I think that the little tea bags of dye work really well. And I like that there's a packet of citric acid. I like the way things are packaged. There's a lot that's good there. What I think needs a little bit of a tweak are the instructions on the packaging, making it easier for people to find those detailed instructions and making it easier even on the website. I know at the top you can go through to instructions, but I think that on the landing page, there should be an easier tutorial that is not just the PDF to download. And I think that it is worth having things be a little bit consistent with what is required and making that really clear to people. And even having what is required, what you need in addition to the kit, encourage brands like Knit Picks to have that on the product page, because I think that makes it easier for a customer to think, oh, okay, these are the things that I need to get started, without having them worry, wait, what if I don't have a thermometer? You don't need a thermometer. It can be helpful to have one, but you also don't need it. So there's just that. Now, I want to show you something that I am extremely impressed about. Okay, these are the two colors that I dyed. This one will be in another video. This is the sleeve from the kit. Look at how well those colors match. I mean, that's pretty darn near perfect. I would say maybe my eggplant is a hair pinker than what is on here, but I don't care. I mean, that is so close. And it is really hard to get printer ink to come out the exact way that you have your swatches. Now, if your color isn't exactly what you want, I think that these dyes would make it slightly harder to edit them, with the exception of having a bunch of colors and almost making stock solutions of them by dissolving the different dyes in small jars, so then you can mix and edit them, which is absolutely something you can do, but you can't easily take like a tiny bit of dye powder to shift a color a little bit. You'd have to dissolve the whole tea bag. But I still think that there is something that is really beginner friendly about this. I think that it's really, really close. Just, yeah, needs a few tweaks to the instructions. Of course, I'm coming at this as a semi-professional dyer. I'm an independent dyer. I dye yarn for my living, for my job. And I also, by making tutorials and content, get a lot of questions from viewers. And so therefore I know the kinds of questions beginners are asking, and I know the kinds of things that were intimidating for people getting started. And so therefore, some of these things that I'm nitpicking come about the experience and that I have, and how, if this was my product, how I would do things differently. But I do think it's really cool. And again, I have not reached out to the brand at all, but well, Tinctures Dyes, if you're watching this and want to reach out and chat with me, I'd be more than happy to do that. So anyway, if you want to learn more about the dyes, I'll have my KnitPicks affiliate link plus links to the actual brand website down below. And the best way you can support all of the content here is by subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss a new video. And please let me know if there are other beginner dye kits that you would like me to look into. I can't promise I'm going to look into everything, but it was a lot of fun sort of looking at this product and trying to think about what I might find confusing if I went back a decade, or what I would do differently as like the expert if I was producing this, and what I would want to share and communicate with the customer. So I don't know, I had so much fun with this. And I hope you did too. And if you're looking for other ways to support content here, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon, where you can get early access to some videos and behind the scenes sneak peeks as I'm working on filming YouTube videos, and that's a lot of fun as well. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.